that if a business or an organization doesn't have AI capability and enablement for minimum 25% of their operations in the next 3 years, they will die. So if in 20, 30 years, we want a Kenyan citizen, a Ugandan citizen, or somebody from Togo or Benin or Malawi to have a job in an organization that is competing in the global market, they need to be similarly AI and digitally enabled. And that is nowhere near possible at the pace at which we're moving today. Africa is not one market. It's 54 countries, 54 regulatory environments. Thankfully, there is some scale because actually the capital comes from development banks who cover the entire continent. Look, by nature, so people say you're either glass half full or glass half empty.
So now we are pretending to be glass half empty.
No, we're not pretending. So by nature, I'm glass overflowing, right?
Welcome back to Why Should We Care About African Data Centers, a podcast where we tackle the big questions shaping the industry. I'm your host, Ville Wacklin, and I'm today joined by Vivek Mittal, the CEO and member of board at AfiDA, our partner in getting digital infrastructure project off the ground in Africa. If you are in this sector, you've probably come across him. Vivek seems to be everywhere, and he somehow replies to messages at any hour, which makes me sometimes worry about his work-life balance. But that's exactly why I think he's the perfect person to talk about what it really takes to push project forward. Welcome to the show, Vivek. How's life?
Absolutely grand, Ville, and I'm delighted to be here with you. And thank you very much for having me.
What are the working hours at the moment?
It does feel to other people it's 24/7. I do work pretty much every day of the week, but it is. I don't see this as work. Number one, I read my passions are such that actually I get to apply what I'm reading and thinking about, and I get to read and think about what I'm working on. So it works beautifully.
So it's really a passion project for you.
It is more a, my God, how did I get into this? And how lovely.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It sounds like you found a real purpose in your work life.
I think that's one way to say it, yes.
Cool. So we are recording this at the tail end of ITW in Kenya, Nairobi. We've had a little joint venture here. Could you speak about the joint venture? I know you can also tell a little bit more about AfiDA. What is AfiDA and what you're trying to achieve and so forth.
So starting with what we've done over the last few days, which is absolutely brilliant. So yesterday afternoon, we had 6 developers of digital infrastructure pitch. Diff and ourselves have been working on this earnestly since the middle of July, I think. So just over 3 months, I think, or 2 months.
Yeah. For those who don't know, DIF stands for Digital Investment Facility, which is where I work.
Digital Investment Facility, which is an EU gateway, Team Europe project. And so just to describe what has happened, and these 6 projects are respectively from Namibia, Zambia, DRC, Kenya, Uganda, Senegal. In all, they're raising something in the tune of about $150 million for very innovative, high-impact internet access, cloud, fiber, and data centers. Data centers are the most prolific element of what they're doing. Now, I would say you should think of them as rough diamonds. They have a lot of capability. They have a real drive to have this impact. They've all come from. These are young, and I'd say young. I'm 56, so anybody who's 55 or less is young in my book. They've all had lovely careers, and they've given that up to chase a dream, to do something useful. Our most successful project is actually the first water PPP project, a $1.3 billion water PPP project in the Limpopo province of South Africa, which is serving critical mining operations and community. And they are going to get affordable, reliable, sustainable water. To the extent they were about to give up, they had some mortal issues on the project, a lot of support, but they had and they solved the issues by working in the Catapult. And they've got now so much confidence that they're actually building a $1.5 billion electric transmission energy storage project in the same footprint.
Well, that's some impact there.
So it is. All I did was put the right people together, right? So it shouldn't be taking very much of the credit there. But the fact that a project that was going to fail is now succeeding and they're replicating that experience in something else is wonderful.
I think I disagree with you there. I think you should take a lot of credit because I think every industry needs those people who can pull people together to work together. It doesn't matter if it's a music industry or digital infrastructure or whatever industry you can come up with that's growing and so forth. I think you always need those connectors. So I really thank you for doing that work.
Well, that's very kind of you. We'll leave it as there in that phase. But hopefully that gives you. Now, AfiDA itself deserves a few words. In 2020, I was approached by a lovely gentleman called Andrew Johnston, who founded the first climate fund for the Global South. He's got $6 billion under management. And he asked me to take a look at this. And I was kind of looking for work. I had a little bit of experience in this sort of area before that. He said, take a look at this association. They had started it. Actually, it was a brainchild of the CIO, another lovely gentleman, Oliver Andrews, who was in 2017 was a chief investment officer of Africa Finance Corporation. And he pulled together Andrew and other people to create AfiDA, which is meant to be the voice of the private sector.
Which AfiDA stands for?
Africa Infrastructure Development Association. And we're based in Mauritius. They wanted to be in Africa, for Africans, by Africans, as a nonprofit. So I took this on in 2020, and there was a board of 12 people, leaders from, who were from development banks, from energy companies, from funds, one very, very good, capable law firm as well. And but nobody gave me a definition of what to do. They told me a lot of what not to do. So they didn't care for newsletters or conferences and that kind of thing. But they also did not want me to go and trample on their business in the way they did business. So there was a lot of don't do this, don't do that. Yeah. And then I sat back and looked. And actually, it's very strange that there's lots of money. All these people can raise more money and have more money available than they can deploy in any given year. And we've always known there are lots of projects who struggle to find, justify and get in front of capital providers and actually access that capital. So I noodled this and I went back in my own past as a project financier, project developer of clean energy. That's what I've done since I left university in the early 90s. And I said, okay, what can we do? And, so we said, and that's how the accelerator kind of came together. There was a lot of opposition from amongst the board. A lot of people didn't want me to do it, but I had a few champions who said, actually, this sounds like worth trying. And 3 years later, it has got a lot of traction. So currently my board members alongside me are Osario Ogabide Orobosa, who's the head of project development at AFC, Africa Finance Corporation. And Andrew Johnson is chair. He's from Climate Fund Managers. We also have a lovely supporter in the form of, we do work in cities and urban development. So Charter Cities Institute, which is a nonprofit from Washington, D.C., is also a big supporter of our work. And their founder, Dr. Mark Luther, is also on my board. We have a Mauritian director as well, Suzanne Gujarat-Rubel. So the five of us have been through quite an intense period because, this is not the sort of thing that, if people had perceived the need for an accelerator, a training program, the advocacy platform that we have, if others would be doing it. There are other alternatives, but nobody really sees the tangible value out of that, right? And what I've just described to you is a project was failing, it succeeded, they're doing a second project. But who was behind that to give them that little impetus, point them in the right direction?
Yeah, that's great. And I think, of course, the Catapult accelerator concept is very useful for the project, but I felt it was also quite refreshing concept for an event like ITW. So where, most of the sessions are panels or keynotes. So this was something completely different, and the room was full of curious people watching and listening to those pitches and the feedback. And I think it's also a great way to learn for the public about these projects. And maybe, I'm sure there were other project developers in the crowd listening that, hey, what should I possibly do differently? And where do I have to focus on?
That's exactly right. And we also had a leaders roundtable earlier on day 0 before the conference started. There were other discussions as well. But these projects, of course, the projects themselves and the mentors, they get an opportunity to transact. But that also gives us a very tangible list of things that are not working. Yep. And our leaders' discussion that took place was informed by some of that. So that's the other thing that happened. What enthused me is, in a way, we're doing this for the 12th time. We know what works, what doesn't work. But each and every time I get, so positively sort of enthused by the level of energy and the enthusiasm and the interest that is there. And our discussions at the Leaders Forum were very, very sharp and instructive as well. So that positive feedback between the leaders' discussion and moving the projects along. Now, the third angle is what we are going to do next is take all of that to the people who are missing from the room, namely government. Many people felt the mobile operators need to be in the room in more numbers. And there's an opportunity to actually move the needle in terms of vision, in terms of policy, in terms of regulation, in terms of the large-scale commercial arrangements in the market to actually then solve the problems that hold back investment.
Yeah. Do you feel like the digital infrastructure sector on this continent has moved too much in silos, kind of like the data center people trying to push their own agendas, and then, the connectivity people somewhere else, telcos, pushing their own agendas? Do you feel like there's a need to move as a whole ecosystem?
There is an element of evolution that each market goes. And of course, Africa is not one market. It's 54 countries, 54 regulatory environments. Thankfully, there is some scale because actually the capital comes from development banks who cover the entire continent. The MNOs, before data, there was voice. And there's a lot of complaining about MNOs and their behavior, but it is very important to understand one thing. There is not 1 cent of subsidy that goes into anybody's telephone bills. There is no government agency, no development fund that pays for the end users. So there's a lot of subsidy in water and oil and gas and electricity and that kind of thing. There's no subsidy, even in transport. So they have created continental businesses entirely on a commercial basis. And the discussion was very instructive in that, you see, there is a certain affordability and a need. And they've figured out a way of making money from satisfying that need. But is that appropriate? Because actually looking forward, and one of the comments I was made is, AI is a level playing field. Everybody's trying to figure out what to do with AI. But are we capable of AI? And, I think you and I were talking earlier. You see, I spent 6 weeks in India. You were talking about work-life balance. So I move around. I'm a proper nomad. I carry my yoga mat and my computer, and I can work from anywhere. I find time to chill out, read, be with friends. But one engagement led me to a discussion, and where India has 1.4 billion people as a single country. They have hundreds of thousands of engineers who graduate every year, and many of them escape to Silicon Valley, and they are the engines behind all the AI developments, etc. So as a nation, they're kicking themselves for having missed out the LLM. That should have really happened. Large language models and AI development should have happened there. But they are now, they're not behind in terms of using that to. So the stat that was given to me was that in India, if the pace at which AI is being adopted in business and in households between B2C and B2B and B2G and G2C, if you will, and there the C is citizens, the pace at which things are moving, that if a business or an organization doesn't have AI capability and enablement for minimum 25% of their operations in the next 3 years, they will die. Now, if I can imagine in Vietnam, in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, in places in Latin America, Brazil, etc., Argentina, they have the same dynamics. They're doing the same thing. So if in 20, 30 years, we want a Kenyan citizen, a Ugandan citizen, or somebody from Togo or Benin or Malawi to have a job in an organization that is competing in the global market, they need to be similarly AI and digitally enabled. And that is nowhere near possible at the pace at which we're moving today. So that is the challenge, the vision. Somehow people ask me how that happens. I don't know, but I do get to meet leaders of countries, ministers of finance, vice presidents, and I'm not talking to them about Catapult or what we can do and things like that. I'm asking them, what is their vision for what their country's position in the global economy will be in 25, 30 years? What is the planning? What is the life of their citizen going to look like at that point in time? What are they going to be doing better than people in other parts of the world? There is nobody who has given me a good answer to that. And that is the one worry I have for Africa.
Okay, so this is speaking to African leaders, not in India or Asia or in general.
No, my work is 100% in Africa.
Yeah. So maybe going back to, because you brought India, is that, in the last 20, 30 years, they've taken extreme leaps in their economic growth and building the digital infrastructure and digital skills and all that. Do you think, did they have a plan?
No.
All those years ago?
Honestly, no. A lot of it is serendipity. And so I have done a deep dive. Of course, I spent a lot of time in India. I have friends who are in leading positions. I hear stories, read the newspaper, etc. I know it intimately. And I've actually built wind energy projects over there. I've actually done business in India as well. There is the history of telecoms in India the last 30 years, and books are starting to be written because it's a runaway success. To give you comparatives, the average per capita or per subscriber monthly usage is about, in sub-Saharan Africa, is 6 gigabytes a month per subscriber. In India, it's 30. Okay. Right? So 5 times, right? The global average is 22. Now, that is what I'm saying, that all these projects that we had, the biggest question is, how are you going to make revenue? Why the big question? Because of the simple reason that there is a lot of people moving around with 3G, 4G. There's a lot of policies around 4G. Right now, there's a seminar on data sovereignty that is taking place over here. But all of that conspires to restrict investment. And we know, I don't want to go into names, but a lot of developers or people who are sitting on data center capacity is being underutilized. After 2 or 3 years of being built, there are 30, 40% utilization. And that's not a good return on investment at all. So converting that demand and potential into actual revenue, usage and revenue, is proving very, very difficult. but it's not difficult in other parts of the world. So the question has to be asked, why? So, we can't force data to come and reside, and it has to have a use. It has to flow. So there's a combination of policies and commercial arrangements. And I think for the first time, we have a little bit of visibility. But coming back to your original point was there a plan 30 years back? There wasn't in India. And there was a lot of corruption, scandals came out, people were arrested, went to jail. And that was at 2G level. But at some point in time, a couple of things happened by design, which had bigger impact than anybody believed. So I remember the first auctions in the early 90s when some silly prices were quoted for, second, third tier cities in the licenses. Nobody understands. This is how stupid that somebody has gone and bid these hundreds of millions of dollars for a license in the middle of nowhere, which has, a population of 500,000 people. But that was in the center of India. So that company, which is now called Airtel, right, had the foresight to think that actually that city in the center of India is where all the traffic from all over the country is going to transact. So they wanted that. Strategically, they saw the potential for that and were willing to pay money down. Now, that was in the early 90s. And there was a lot of trouble, and then India went through ups and downs. They had the nuclear test, they had embargoes and all of that. There were global financial crises that hit the country, etc. Fast forward to 2012, there was, these same companies, the 5 or 6 of them, the telco companies, they were really struggling to make money given the high amounts of money they were paying for the spectrums. So the government actually then, at that point in time, the new current government that is there, had a very sort of clever, evolved way of working with business. They didn't have the confrontational, to squeeze business kind of attitude. So they converted their fixed fee licenses into shares of revenue. They got on the same side as business. You don't hear that very often, right? And that, so the second thing, in addition to the vision, government actually having the right attitude towards the private capital is what is missing in most African countries. Kenya does better than most countries. It actually, we run annual surveys of infrastructure, private sector interest in infrastructure. One of the issues we look for is countries. Kenya is always in the top 3 or 4. It's not the biggest economy by far. South Africa, of course, comes in first, but there's a lot of issues with South Africa. I speak with leaders, with mayors of cities, leaders of mining companies, of energy companies, telecoms, MNOs, and now data centers and things like that, digital economy. Everybody has the same problem, converting that demand into, that demand and potential into revenue. That is the number one issue everybody faces. At the end of that, is a consumer, a citizen, a customer, all the same people. They are having to allocate money from not an abundance of income, disposable income that they have. They have to make allocations. The average African citizen typically has to decide on a month-to-month basis what are they going to prioritize, and that changes between school fees, between health, between food, energy, water, and oftentimes the service that they're getting the product they're getting is not very reliable. So anyway, I can keep going.
Yeah, let's. Thank you for the ramble. I really really appreciate that. But let's summarize some points there. So, we are working with the data center projects in the continent and basically trying to get them to a level where an investor can come and invest in them. So if you had to name 3 top barriers to funding projects, what would they be?
Look, I've already told you about, mindset, vision is one. Because we're not getting, I can guarantee you there's more money available today in Africa than can be deployed. Yeah. So that is a question of vision and action, right? That's outside the realm of finance. The third thing I would say is that actually there is this dependence on international capability and capital, which is unjustified. There is a lot of capital, there's a lot of capability on the continent. It's not hard to figure out how to finance a data center of any scale. Yeah. So unless African countries, nations, again, there's a policy issue here, but also business leaders' mindset. Unless they think actively of working on actually using their own capability and encouraging their own entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs not just for development of assets, but also lawyers, engineers, technical advisors, the entire ecosystem that's required to come together. Unless there is indigenized, everybody's looking for manufacturing of something. There are all these special economic zones coming up. There's only so many places that Hewlett-Packard and Gap and Kellogg's and all will go, right? BMWs are not going to be manufactured here for a long, long time to come. But at least let's work on satisfying African demand by African capability and African enterprise and African capital, right? So that's the third area, is to provoke capital, domestic capital markets, domestic banking, domestic finance available for these things. We are very fortunate to have strong interest from multilateral banks and development banks, but they're the only act in town. They can't do everything. They hear so much. Development banks are not willing to take risk. They're taking more risks than they're capable of or they're allowed to. So that's a big area. Domestic capital resources mobilization is very, very important.
Which one of these do you think are the hardest to fix, and which one of these challenges could be addressed quite quickly, if there was will?
Look, I mean, in a way, I think part of the mindset is this is all very complicated and it requires an ecosystem to come together. The ecosystem, like any ecosystem, you think of a fish tank or a pond or, on a bigger level, an ocean or any natural ecosystem. You can't really control it, to a certain extent. Fish tank, you can a little bit. But an ecosystem requires regular nourishment. And nourishment for commercial ecosystems is regular supply of projects to develop and to finance, right? So that is something that takes time. In a way, the Catapult accelerator is that ecosystem artificially, right? We bring the different stakeholders together and force them to sit for 3 hours in front of 6 companies, right? That's the acceleration, that's the ecosystem, right? Otherwise, these people will float around for 1 year getting to even half of those people. What is easily fixable is the vision, is people coming together to saying, we must do this, we can do this. It is difficult, but it's not impossible. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So let's go to pessimism versus optimism. Start with the pessimism. So what makes you pessimistic? What makes you worried about the future of African digital infrastructure in the next 5 to 10 years?
Look, by nature, people say you're either glass half full or glass half empty.
So now we are pretending to be glass half empty.
No, we're not pretending. So by nature, I'm glass overflowing, right? So glass half empty is just completely the opposite of anything in my being. So I think, again, I'll tell you where I sort of started with. What you and I are doing, if we decide to go and sit on a beach and forget about Africa, Africa will be absolutely fine, right? People will figure it out. There are smart, capable people all across the continent. And, the one thing I pinch myself is my good fortune of meeting them day in, day out. You won't believe it, Ville. I started with 50 contacts 5 years back. My Rolodex now has 5,300 people. Yeah. So the pace at which I'm meeting people, clever people, capable people, hardworking people, it's amazing. Yeah. So very little to be pessimistic about. But yes, there is a challenge in getting people to that ecosystem of diverse interests and diverse capabilities to come together behind one long-term vision. That is a challenge. And that is what your role and my role is.
Exactly. So you gave a few really good reasons, which I agree to, by the way, to be optimistic. But is there something that you are specifically optimistic about for the next 5 to 10 years?
I think we have 37 as of yesterday, 43 companies, new projects in our accelerator. I think each and every one of them has a chance to make some good impact. I think there will be a lot of people who look at their success and get into the game. So repetition is a large part of how economies thrive, right? You make that shirt, you look very handsome in that shirt, it looks good, somebody will figure out how to make, and say, okay, let's try a different color, right? And that's how people will copy that fashion, others will figure out how to make something better. And there's competition and people improve on that over time, right? Yeah. So replication is what I think will take hold. That is hard. Not every country, not every sector will succeed or grow at the same pace. But if we can inject this hyper positivity, let's call it, people talk about hyperscaling, yeah. If we can hyperscale enthusiasm and a common purpose on giving African citizens and entrepreneurs the right spot in the global environment and giving them the capabilities, the continent will be flying.
Thank you. Before we close the conversation, I want to take us back to ITW, and we've been having discussions with industry people for 4 days now. So what are the biggest learnings, biggest takeaways of the event for you? And I'm now specifically talking about the data center people and the data center business.
So I came with the question on why is that demand and demand for data, the potential for data usage, why is that not translating into revenue, right? And equally importantly, how do we solve it? Yeah, what are the modalities? And I've got some really good input behind that. Still some work to do, but we know who are the actors who are not missing. We know a little bit about. So I'm a little bit forward in crystallizing thinking around who to talk to, what to say to them, and how to go about addressing that challenge. So again, we are not going to be doing very much. We are just going to be bringing the right people. We'll not even be bringing. We'll be hassling them. We'll be being a nuisance around them to say, like, come to the table, hear what people have to say. Yeah. You have, there's a certain outcome that we are headed towards. There's a better outcome if we address this.
Yeah, that's a good takeaway. Okay, word association is the concept.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, let's start. Politics.
A waste of time.
Wind.
Energy.
India.
To learn from.
Local capital.
Absolutely crucial.
Hyperscalers.
Okay.
Risk.
It's the essence of scaling capital.
Past.
To learn from.
Power.
Power is to be careful of.
Whiskey.
The essence of life.
Okay. Vivek, last question. Why should we care about African data centers?
I think my instinct is to look at it differently. Why should we, as in if you talk about DIF, AfiDA, people from outside, there are two angles. We should really look at it from the other side. Is that it's a privilege for us who are in the enabling environment to actually assist people who are going to be great in any case, right? So we are along for the ride. If we can help them a little bit, then all the great effort. Because actually, at the end of the day, the facilities and the funding and your energy and what we are doing is really the generosity of others who, DIF is eventually funded by taxpayer money from Europe. We get grants from people who earned money the hard way. So that is one idea. The other is, I think, it's so interesting, the level of energy, the enthusiasm, the actual impact when something gets done over here is so so energizing on its own to be part of that. And the third is, over time, surely, economically, Africa will remain in the 5, 6, 10% range for global economy. So it's not that crucial for the world, but all the natural resources, both minerals and nature, are very, very important. Population is going to be 25, 30%, 40% by the end of the century. And it'll be really Africa's time. So, good to be part of that mix, if you will, economically. So 3 very good reasons.
Thanks. Thank you, Vivek Mittal. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast.
And a great honor for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is part of the Data Governance in Africa initiative, helping the African Union shape data policies, enable cross-border data flows, and build secure, sustainable digital infrastructure. Funded by the EU and 5 member states, it supports a unified digital market in Africa.